Rick Hogaboam, how are you, sir?
Good morning. Good to be with you, Todd.
Good to be with you as well. Dude, this is a really tough one. You know, you and I scheduled this a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
We're hustling to get the interview in.
Yeah.
Because you work full time, obviously, as
Yes,
the
I
Idaho
do.
County Clerk.
Or Canyon County.
Excuse me. Oh my God.
Sorry.
My apologies.
Yeah. But
Canyon County.
you got a wonderful clerk in Trent. And
Yeah, Trent is great.
Both of us are good friends.
Trent
but
is,
yeah.
And today's 9/11. That's a sobering event. Charlie Kirk was assassinated yesterday. I talked to Secretary of State Phil McGrain last night, and in talking about elections, he was saying about, it was like 6 months ago. He was like, listen, you don't know. And again, I really don't. He wasn't putting me down, but he was like, you really don't understand until you become one of the people, how real the threat to your life is.
Yeah.
Right. And, here he was like, look, I'm a Secretary of State. It's like, I administer votes. I do a lot of things. And to have people like a Secretary of State in Arizona or Georgia have just constant death threats and have people that are willing to put the hand in the fire for like a not high paying job, a not glamorous job, and put their life on the line to keep, this American experiment going, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, right to bear arms. Like these are the hallmarks of what make America, America.
Yeah, no. Somber day indeed, Matt. The news of Charlie's, political assassination, knowing that he has a beautiful wife and children. And so, I think, the nation's reeling with that, but it's a very unfortunate thing. And then 9/11, it's, you and I we were living when that happened. There's a lot of young people who this happened before them, but it's, you'd hear my grandpa talking about, there's the Pearl Harbor event or the JFK assassination. There's kind of these pivotal moments in our history that are cause for somber reflection. And, but you're right. The Charlie Kirk, he's on campus trying to cultivate the free exchange of ideas, inviting it, giving students a platform for, basically prove me wrong. Inviting debate, doing things, I believe the right way, as you alluded to. The American experiment is intended to help, to allow really a safe space for us to have big discussions and to disagree and to not resort to violence. So, it's a very unfortunate thing. I've, as I was kind of reflecting on this, I've one of my past jobs was, I was a pastor. I was also an executive director for a pregnancy resource center. I'd say that there were threats more in my capacity as a director for the pregnancy resource center and Lifeline Pregnancy Care Center. And all we do there, it was not to engage in the lobbying on the abortion issue. It was really, honestly, to be hands and feet to help assist, provide care and support for women who are going through a difficult pregnancy. We opened a maternity home, transition home, to help give women a housing situation, resources if they're in a bad situation. But it's just shocking when all you're doing is being on the front lines, just trying to help support that. We'd get some hate mail. There would be some threats every once in a while, and you pray to God and know that you don't want to dismiss it, but most of the time, there are people that are trying to get under your skin. It's psychological warfare, and you carry on the work. But yesterday's event with Charlie Kirk's a reminder that, real bullets do fly sometimes, and lives are lost. And, it's a sad situation. So
it is, man. It is. And there's no getting around it. I'm not by my nature a public person. I don't go to a lot of social gatherings. I don't go to any, in fact. Pretty much just come to the studio and then go home and hang out with my kids and my family.
Yeah.
And even with that, it's, I had a real conversation with myself last night. Like, look, man, what are you doing? Like, what are you why keep doing it this way? Like, you're moving through the world. I feel very strongly that I'm contributing something valuable to our community. Great. But, like, I had to reaffirm that. And is that worth it? Right. And again, I'm a nobody. Right. But even that, it's like, you put your face out there. And somebody told me yesterday, or a couple days ago, that she'd had a conversation with, I guess, a colleague who was like, well, I don't know if I can support, Matt, things he says about ICE detention. And it was like, says about ICE detention centers. I don't have any position on ICE detention centers. And the only time I had talked about him was when I had Colonel Bill Gardner from Idaho State Police and the director of Idaho State Police. I'm like he talked about them, but I didn't say anything about them. And a couple of days ago, it was just this reminder. It's like, dude, people attribute sentiment and thoughts and whatever to you, whether or not you are saying it, just because you're there. And, you as county clerk, I'm sure similar things happen. And it's, it's a lot.
Well, I think I mean, Matt, you do an important job. I think you've been pretty fair in having diverse viewpoints on your show. And so you're platforming really subject matter experts across the spectrum, a broad spectrum, from healthcare to hunting. But I mean, you do a good job. And so, I mean, some people might get frustrated that you're even having someone on the show. And, and that's very frustrating, because you have this kind of consistent brand that you're inviting people to come out and talk about things that a lot of Idahoans don't know a lot about. So it's really a cool opportunity to learn. And I think you've been a great platform. I've benefited from listening to stuff, everything from ag industry to, immigration status to the economy. You've had people on from both sides of the aisle, Republicans and Democrats. And, it's important. This is important. I think our founders wanted platforms where we can speak in a safe space. And but it's unfortunate that whenever you say something, you risk offending someone, and you certainly hope to God that people in their offense do not feel the need to shed blood and take life. That's not how we resolve our disputes on public policy issues. So,
well, Rick, look, man, I appreciate you. I don't want to lose this opportunity. I think you and I could both probably go down rabbit holes on topics that we're not here about to talk about today. Specifically, you are the Canyon County clerk, and you are running for mayor of Nampa.
That is true.
That is true.
That is true.
Some people would agree. Talk to me about this.
Yeah, so my background, a little bit going back, just concisely, I ran for city council, Nampa, back in 2017 and was seated in 2018. That was the result. I used to be on the editorial board for the Idaho Press, and I'm kind of a nerd, read the news. And it was great. You read all the news, and then you get together once a week and talk about the news. And that was a great, enriching experience. But a lot of people said, Rick, you're well-researched, well-studied. You should run for city council, and city council packets are thick. They could be hundreds of pages long, and you meet every, in Nampa, really 2 to 3 times a month, and you're making decisions. And so I'm kind of a speed reader, and you're trying to digest a lot of content. I kind of call it like a book club, but you actually make decisions when you gather, and important decisions affecting the community. So, ran for city council, and 2 years in my term, there was an opening in the mayor's chief of staff position in the mayor's office. And Mayor Kling and I, we didn't know each other very much at all we ran on the same cycle. So she was elected mayor when I was elected city council. We weren't part of a slate of candidates necessarily. Respected her work at that time with the Chamber of Commerce. I was doing work as a pastor and a nonprofit director. So that was kind of my work in the community. And, we talk, and, we realized this would maybe be a good duo. So the mayor was, an incredible leader, mentor, but I stepped in as chief of staff for 4 years, and we have a strong mayoral form of government in Nampa. So, in our city's ordinance, the mayor is the CEO, the chief administrative officer, kind of all of the above. So we don't have, like some cities have a city manager where you go hire someone who's, public administrator. So, I was thankful for the opportunity to serve as chief of staff. I think I had a front row seat, more than a front row seat, was an active participant in a lot of the good things Nampa accomplished over, the past really 8 years. But those middle 4 years as chief of staff, and then stepped into the county position a couple of years ago. So running for mayor is really to return to the city I love, and work with people I already know, and try to build on the legacy of Mayor Kling. There's a lot of foundational things that have been set up right. There's a healthy culture. And, I'm excited to seek the office of mayor and be honored to have the vote of the people of Nampa to be able to continue progress in certain areas, public safety, traffic infrastructure improvement, and recreational opportunity, enhancement to recreational opportunity. We want to be the greatest city to live and raise a family. And so that's part of my platform. And so quality of life is really kind of the overarching thing that I'm concerned about. And so you do need to know the details of policy and understanding how tax increment financing works, to how to secure funding for certain transportation projects, and whether there's federal grants or state grants, how to lobby. I have good relationships with our federal delegation as well as our state legislators, and looking to leverage, basically politics and in a large degree is relationship building, the ability to sit down and have a trusted conversation about trying to solve problems. And, we have some challenges. There's transportation projects cost more and more every year, and the cost of projects grow at a faster rate than our budget capacity. So that's created challenges on how do you, as a city, fund all the projects. It's a little disheartening. Over the past 5-6 years, construction inflation double digit year over year. You might have a whole slate of projects that you intended to do that year, but literally the inflation within the year exceeded what you expected, and you have to trim back a project or two. And so, there is this pressure as we grow. There's also, we're not doing all the stuff we're hoping to do within the budget capacity. So how do you, in a fiscally conservative community, try to fund positive outcomes and still, respect the fact that our taxpayers are also dealing with inflation and paying more for everything. So, it's a challenging dynamic, but I feel that I think there's a great team. I know there's a great team in place in the city of Nampa. I hope to work with many of those appointed officials and keep at it. So.
There was, and again, I was very young when this phase happened, but there was a period of the 80s that was coined stagflation, right? Where you had inflation, but you had a stagnant economy that wasn't keeping up with it. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of baked into a problem with municipalities and taxing districts in the state of Idaho, because we've had such high inflation, but the threshold for increasing budgets in concert is not there, right? Like you can't increase your budget as quickly as the cost of things go up.
Correct.
So then, it's almost like you got to scramble to get as much done as quickly as possible before the disparity between the amount of money you have coming in and the cost of the project, grows wider and wider. So when talking about infrastructure, how do you deal with infrastructure and the growing population, the growing needs of infrastructure in Nampa, and also stay within, the allowable budget?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. If there was easy answers, I think we'd all be at it. But you make some good points in that question. How do you keep up? You either have to find ways to generate more revenue, and of course, going to property taxes again is not popular, and the burden is very high. But for example, the city of Nampa did a tremendous job, I feel, in packaging a transportation bond. It was in May of last year, and 57% of the people voted yes on that bond, but it fell short of the 2/3. So we require a supermajority for approval of bonding, but 57% said, I'm willing to pay. It was a $38 million bond to do a lot of stuff, like fix some of the traffic congestion at Marketplace, which is where Costco is, do some safe routes to schools, which is a challenge too, because our annexation patterns, sometimes there's county parcels that pre-exist that don't want to come into the city, so they don't have curb, gutter, sidewalk, and then you approve a subdivision next to it, and you have these sidewalks that go into the front yards of those are county enclave properties. So how do you, and that brings up a whole other question about how we plan and what our annexation pattern should be to ensure that we don't have this
Conflict.
we don't have sidewalks into the the front yards of county enclaves, but safe routes to schools. We have a highway 45 beat trucks and stuff that curl around our library right in the middle of downtown, and it's a very inefficient pattern. It undermines the sense of walkability in downtown, and this would have tried to route some of that traffic, try to get beat trucks out of turning around a core downtown intersection. And so there's several projects try to connect 16 south. So this bond was replacing a bond that was expiring, and it was, I think, about $18 per $100,000 of taxable value of home. And so the average home net of homeowners exemption, $50 a home, 57% people said I'm willing to pay $50 a year to, maybe save 5 minutes a day. You start doing the math, I think the important thing is to try to show the cost benefit analysis. I know there's some people, I can't afford $50, but what if the $50 a year got you
24 hours
of life back in a year? You get a whole day back. And not only that, net out the cost of gas and just idling, and then environmental impact. I mean, you just go down the list, and safety. Yeah. I mean, the aggregate benefit. But I know there's some people like, I don't have $50, but 57% we're okay, but we have, so to kind of answer your question, I think there's another option, maybe not ideal, but to do maybe more a pay as you go, because the state statute does allow, if you want to do a 2-year levy, you only need 50% support. So sometimes when you do these big package bonds, you're going to require 2/3 majority, but you get the certainty of accomplishing all the projects. So I think one thing we need to look at as mayor, convene workshops with council and say, do we want to pick 1 or 2 of those projects that I listed, put before the voters? Do you want to fund this in just a 2-year? And you're asking for a 2-year commitment. 57% approval would accomplish a 2-year temporary, and then you go back in another 2 years and ask. So again, I'm not necessarily saying we impose that on the people. What you do is you put it on the ballot and let the people decide, are they willing to pay $50 a year to get, time back in their life and to improve the safety component as well. The safety as well as the aesthetics of downtown, if you can reroute the state highway. But all these things cost money, and within our budget capacity, as you said, there's not the capacity to do these big multi-million-dollar projects. So without asking for additional levying capacity or borrowing capacity. So one of the things I hope to do is, work with our state partners, the state legislature. One of the things the governor prioritized a few years ago, and I was lobbying on behalf of the city. So in my capacity as chief of staff, I was working on legislative priorities. We did get a grant funding, and City of Nampa and Highway District 1, which is Nampa Highway District, got a combined $10 million, $5 million split to try to do some improvement to tap into Highway 16. So, the governor's office, Speaker Moyle, they were all very supportive of the fact that you're doing this state project, 16, and the partners on the west side of that, because most of 16 actually goes through Canyon County. You're expecting us to tie into this with all the road widening and stuff. We don't have the budget capacity. Right. So if you're wanting us to tie into your state project and make it functional, we're going to need some support. But it would be good to tie into 16 south of 84 to have a connection point into Nampa, because that would prevent people having to get onto 84 in order to get onto 16. And so that would cost money. So I'm hoping to work with our state partners, because there is TECM, which is the Transportation Expansion Congestion Mitigation Fund, and I think that this would be a TECM eligible project. And some of the things is to work with Senator Ben Adams. He's on the Transportation Committee, and Representative Jaron Crane. So when you look at just all the legislators that touch Nampa, there's 2 that are on the Transportation Committee. I've already kind of starting to put a bug in their ear that this is something that we want to probably sit down and visit about.
Sure.
So yeah, I know I kind of rambled a lot, but I think it's a multi-pronged approach of is there state money that we can get? You don't want to ask the taxpayers to pay more unless that's a last resort. But if you present that as a last resort, you're really empowering the people to decide their future. And some might decide I don't have $50 and vote no. Some say, yes, I want time in my life. I want my sanity back, driving to Costco and back. If you can shave 5-10 minutes off that commute and you can improve the safety around downtown, and plus the idle time. So, the important thing I think for the city is to try to quantify what the trade-offs are in policy. And to be a wise steward of taxpayer dollars doesn't just mean not spending any more money than you have to. It's trying to be responsible and accountable for every dollar that we do spend. This is what we're delivering. What is government delivering for your dollar? So when I talk about fiscal stewardship and being a conservative, it's making government work and being accountable for every dollar spent to be able to explain to people this is what your money is purchasing. We're in the business of providing outcomes, infrastructure and outcomes.
And on as you articulated earlier, it's what Nampa wants.
Yes.
Like Nampa should get what Nampa wants.
Yes.
And whatever the threshold mechanism is for the decision, be it 2/3 or just a simple majority, it's like, listen, if you present a 2-year bond and they're like, no, we don't want that. It's like, okay, that's fine. Maybe you, Rick Hogaboam, and maybe Matt Todd, if I lived in Canyon County, maybe we would be like, oh, shoot, like I really liked that. But hey, that's not the position of the elected official. The elected official's like, hey, if the people want it, I have to figure out a way to make it happen.
Yeah.
If the people don't want it, then I don't worry about it because they don't want it, right? And you just go on from there.
Exactly. Yeah. No. Well said. I think that's if you're shooting for the moon,
right,
2/3 majority, and I understand that's actually in our Constitution, so it's not just a legislative fix; it'd be a constitutional fix. So, and I know that there's some frustration with that because that same threshold is what's required for school bonding, jail bonding. So whether it's a school district, the county with the jail, cities trying to do infrastructure, that 2/3 is a very high threshold. So I think we do need to look at how do we maneuver within other options and to give people more choices for maybe a pay-as-you-go, do 2 years. But that wouldn't work necessarily if you have to do let's say you have to do 1,000-bed jail all in one lump sum. It becomes almost an all or nothing thing. But what we're doing at Canyon County right now is actually trying to do a phased approach on the jail. So we're actually didn't ask for a bond. We're spending money out of savings to move the fund balance just as low as I as a clerk want to see it go, and advising the commissioners. But the commissioner said let's start with about 192 bed facility for the women's facility, and then we could figure out the next phase. So I think that's a little bit of a different approach than, say, in the past bonds where it's an all or nothing, fully loaded, nothing. And so a lot of people said, why can't you do a phased approach, a kind of pay as you go approach? And so we'll see how this works. But I think when the people say no, you have to go find another option and work within, again, the confines of the statutory provisions you have, and if or change some of the statutory provisions to allow other options to empower the people to choose how best to fund the infrastructure we need. Yeah.
Again, infrastructure is a big piece.
Yeah.
You also in there mentioned law enforcement and safety, right? And infrastructure and safety, go hand in hand. Talk to me about the state of law enforcement in Nampa.
Well, Nampa's police department is the best. I will continue to echo what Mayor Kling says. I know every mayor or potential mayor would, brag on their police department. But I can tell you in my 4 years as chief of staff, one of the things that was assigned to me was I was the risk coordinator for the city. And a lot of the exposure is in your law enforcement because of all the stops that occur every day and all the potential, all the cars that they're in, driving around. So there's just all this potential for liability. And I just tell you, the culture at Nampa PD, from training, compliance to mitigate risk, make sure that they do things by the book, serve the people well. Chief Huff and leadership, we have the finest, men and women. The dispatch team is amazing. So really law enforcement in Nampa is, I've already told Chief Huff, like if elected mayor, love to have him continue on as police chief, that just keep doing what you're doing and let me know how to support. Like, that's not an area for me to say, hey, here's all the things that need to be fixed with Nampa Police Department, because they got things rolling well. They implemented ComStat years ago, which I actually familiar with, being a data nerd, but that's kind of data driven policing to know how to deploy resources. And so one of the things Nampa is doing well, as you said earlier, is if you can't keep up with the growth, is there a way to stretch your resources and do things smarter? Sure. And that, Nampa PD for the last decade has done a tremendous job. But at some point, as we continue to grow in the future, you will inevitably need to add boots on the ground. You need to expand patrol. Right. If you're adding subdivision after subdivision, you need to maintain some ratios with policing. But crime rate has been down. I think the morale has been very good with Nampa Police Department. I'm very proud of the men and women in the department, and look forward to hopefully being able to really cheerlead and be a support for their continued mission in our community.
Do you think that they're in a position where they need more financial resources? Do you think that they're staffed well enough? Like, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, they got some staff in this current budget cycle, and that's in moving forward, growth's going to necessitate the adding a staff. I think the big challenges are, if Nampa continues to grow north and up, what does the response time look like? Or, the public safety building, the police station is really kind of in our downtown core. But if Nampa continues to fill out this footprint up north, do you need an annex station and capital projects? But yes, I think clearly, as we continue to grow, law enforcement is going to need to be a budget priority. I think it's one of the things. I know you had Mayor Kling on to talk about the Fort Idaho Center, which is a big topic in the community. But from afar, because I'm not at the city of Nampa right now, I can only imagine that mayor, city council members are looking at this list of transportation needs, policing needs, and what the future budget capacity needed to fund that. And you have all of these other amenities and offerings that the city is carrying. And so it becomes this big challenge of, you either need additional revenue or you need to find creative ways to prioritize. And prioritization means you have to kind of choose what are the most important things. I know the city survey every year says police and streets are the top two priorities. And then I think parks and pathways and a lot of these other amenities I'd call are kind of second tier behind that, public safety and streets. We experience streets pretty much every day if you drive. So not everyone goes to the Fort Idaho Center every day. Right. They might go once or twice a year. And so even the parks, as amazing as they are, the library, the use on those are maybe frequent with a smaller percent, but just having it is a force of value and amenity of benefit to the community. But you're having to prioritize what's the most important thing that everyone is affected by, and how do you prioritize? So that's going to be a big challenge moving forward.
Man, that is an interesting balance, which is essentially, okay, what value do we bring from like the Fort Idaho Center or the library? Like how do we factor that in with like, okay, but we need police 24 hours a day, every day. Correct. When you talk about the Fort Idaho Center, there is obviously that is a draw into the area, yes, right? And you have, large events. Like I've been to an event there, really enjoyed it. And the argument obviously goes like, hey, we attract people in, they stop for like dinner, they get gas, they engage in the area and go out. Man, the egg factory, by the way, shout out Egg Factory.
Is that your spot? Is that your spot?
That's my spot.
Okay. All right.
I took my son lizard hunting in Murphy. So, like I take him there, and then it's always like, hit the Egg Factory.
Okay. Yeah.
Fantastic.
It's a great spot.
Yeah. But that the question becomes like, how do we get more economic activity into that area? And not just, once or twice a year, but how do we get more regular economic activity? Surrounding areas are working really, really hard to have, like Indian Creek Plaza and have these centralized, like the Village and Meridian. Yeah. You have all of these centralized kind of economic hubs that are really trying to draw and capture dollars and get economic activity. What do we do in Nampa?
Yeah, no, great question. That that probably deserves its own show, economic development. And I don't know if you've had the economic development director from Nampa and
I've never had the pleasure.
Robin Sellers, or
Robin Sellers.
If you've had anyone from BVEP, the Boise Valley Economic Partnership,
No.
I think
Gosh,
you should probably have some people in that talk economic development. But that is a big part of my platform to help enhance continued industrial growth. Nampa has been a leader in a large degree in ensuring a diverse tax portfolio of having industrial growth. But what you're speaking about, what's interesting is the Fort Idaho Center was built by using urban renewal. And so really the conversation, because urban renewal is able to front this investment, but then you get to capture the increment value of anything that already exists that goes up in value, or anything that's newly built. So you're paying back essentially that initial investment. And then when it expires, that capacity comes to the city. So one of the things with the Fort Idaho Center is the city did benefit by capturing an increment into our budget that was sufficient to pay back what the original investment was. The city does, I think this is an important piece of the puzzle, because there's also expiring urban renewal projects in Nampa that are going to expire in 2031. When the city inherits the obligation to maintain whatever that asset is, we're also getting budgetary capacity. So I think we need to budget within that increment, capital renewal for the future replacement. But urban renewal right now, downtown Nampa is in an urban renewal district. And again, they're looking at a 2031 sunset, and there's a 5-6 year window here where they have some tools to make investment, to drive up investment. They grab that increment back to pay back again what the original investment is, but in 2031, when it sunsets, it gets handed to the city. So what's interesting is if the city makes investment where there's already existing properties, and you see reinvestment, rehabilitation, and the assessor comes and increases that value, that increment doesn't get added to our budget. It's a little confusing. So because our budget's still, the tax collection is budget driven. So what that does is that increment actually will probably lower everyone's taxes by a slight increment. So the increased value, but if the city's incurring a cost, to drive up the value in one area, it doesn't capture it. Now, if it's a new development, that new development comes under our tax rolls, new construction. And I know there's been discussions on how the new construction comes on. So new construction is additive into our budget capacity the following year, because that's not an increase over everyone else. That's just adding your tax burden. It's adding your cover charge to join the dinner party, essentially, right? It's not increasing the cost of everyone else. So, so I think urban renewal.
If I may try to sum, because you threw out a lot of things here. In the next 5 to 6 years, you still have the capacity to aggregate funds to make infrastructure improvements in downtown Nampa.
Correct.
That will increase the value of downtown Nampa.
Yes.
So if we're at a dinner party and everybody has burgers, all of a sudden somebody gets a lobster. That increases the value of that particular area.
Yes.
That's different than adding people to the dinner party, right? Correct. Instead of having 10 people, you have 12 people. So again, little nuances with cost and everything. But what the real core of it is, look, in the next 5 to 6 years, we still have the capacity to focus funds on infrastructure.
Yes.
So for instance, a larger, and I don't know that you're doing this, but you're like, look, people can't put a hotel in downtown Nampa right now because we don't have a large enough sewer pipe. I'm making this up. I don't know if that's true or not. You're like, so the city is going to increase using urban renewal. We're going to increase the size of the sewer pipe and make a fertile environment for hotel companies to come and say, dude, they got the sewer pipe. Like, we could build a hotel down here. Now you have a hotel. Now you have like the Red Robin that opens next to the hotel. And then you have, events that start spurring up because they're like, okay, well, we could do a convention thing at this hotel, and then people are going out to eat. So you're trying to set the stage in downtown Nampa for, hey, you have the capacity to come and invest here. It would be a viable investment.
Yes.
The city of Nampa obviously is not building the hotel. This is where it's like, no. This is the private-public partnership.
Yes.
We figure out what the private industry wants, and we set the stage for them. They're the ones that take the risk.
Correct.
But this capacity to make those changes will sunset in the next 5 to 6 years because the urban renewal district in that area is going to time out.
It is, and I think the urban renewal is one tool, and there's pros and cons of urban renewal, and so I'm not maybe if you had a dedicated show on urban renewal, the pros and cons. The fact is it's a tool. And it also is over marketplace. So some of the traffic mitigation projects that we're looking at marketplace could also be funded by urban renewal, not so much to facilitate new investment, but to maybe better accommodate what's already there, because there's a lot of complaint about traffic mitigation there. So I think, so as mayor, urban renewal boards are appointed by the mayor, but they exist as their own decision-making body. And it's kind of an interesting relationship that we have. So they are technically their own. So you have the Nampa Development Corporation with appointed members who are making these big decisions. So, but continued investment in your example, if urban renewal helps facilitate some of this economic investment downtown, the other challenge is rehabilitation. So it costs more to take an old building that needs a lot of help to put money in and rehab it than it does to just go buy bare land and grow up. So one of the things that's challenging to downtown investment is they're absorbing the purchase price. The land value cost has gone up because it's prime real estate, and then you have all this rehabilitation cost. So you're all in for tons of money before you're even generating money back. So unlike the ROI pro forma, it's a big challenge. So one of the things that I also want to look at is what sort of tax abatement program can we have? We have it for the big players. If the big players are going to expand, they might get like a 5-year on the increment that they add to not be taxed that. So, but if you were to make improvements, let's say you bought an old property, you made a restaurant out of it, the assessor will say, congratulations, your property is worth 3 times as much and your taxes go up the following year. And it's like, I just made all this investment. I'm not requiring any added service necessarily from the city, but you're like, and you're going to tax me in perpetuity. So really a tax abatement would you're still taxed on what the base is. It just lets you have a little bit of relief on that increment tax burden to let it phase in, to give you a little on-ramp so that you can make it, that your business can actually make it. Because if your business makes it, we all do better.
And that first 60 months of that investment, that's a crucial period where you're like, I'm like right at the black. And, that
that margin can make a difference. And there's a lot of significant hookup fees and other things that the city want us to look at. There are some programs. How do you finance some of the water hookup fees and stuff? Because the thing is, once you get on board and you succeed, you're paying taxes every year forever. So the city in some ways, we're benefiting from your success and preserving the value of the property. And the thing is, the city didn't increase the value of your property. That's capital investment that came from you or, a loan. And the city gets to benefit from the taxes of it in perpetuity. So we need to make investment. We need to incentivize investment in such a way that those margins don't cause someone to go somewhere else.
They're not prohibitive.
Or just not make the investment because then it's our loss. Right. And so sometimes we can make development so hard, so complicated that that we don't see the benefit, the economic benefit. Plus it's just the human flourishing. We want to see flourishing. We want to see successful businesses. So
listen, all of this to be said, because Nampa is a sweet spot, right? Nampa's growing. I was talking to somebody running for mayor of Garden City, and Garden City is a unique landlocked little pocket that still has attainable housing, not affordable housing, but like attainable housing, where you have people that really enjoy that area. They got like a lot of culture, a lot of breweries, a lot of wineries, a lot of cool things happening. And it's still a spot where you can afford a starter home. Nampa is very similar in that it's still on that verge of like, okay, we can get starter homes. You can have people that have high quality of life. You're not, capitulating on a lot of things, but man, it's growing. You can't stop growth as some people like, I'm going to stop. It's like, okay, how are you going to stop? Like we have property rights here. This is a difficult question. How do you think it's best to manage growth, especially from a mayoral seat? Because city council is the one that, make a lot of plans and decide on.
You're right. They're the decision-making body. The mayor breaks a tie. So I think several things. We need to manage growth and we need to know what the cost of growth is. So I've become sort of this nerd on advocating for, and it's not a new novel idea. It's something that a lot of entities throughout the country incorporate into their comprehensive plan, which Nampa's updating their comprehensive plan, and that's to do a fiscal impact analysis. So a lot of times your future land use map is based on aesthetics, what you think is compatible. But let's say you ask this hypothetical question. Let's say we actually build out completely, as we say we build out. What does the tax revenue, the service level look like? Is quality of life being protected? Are we going backwards, or is it enhanced? And so you need to do a fiscal impact analysis on how many more police do you have to hire to service, those additional rooftops. What's the tax revenue for those rooftops? Can they cover the cost? And if not, then what you're doing is you start rationing services, which means you might compromise quality of life. So it might be, okay, maybe our future land use map needs to be less rooftop heavy. Maybe it's based on direction. Where do we go? That makes more sense. Maybe you need more industrial. So some of the zoning designations might need to change. So
may I ask a question?
Yes.
When you say directional, I actually hadn't, again, I'm not that bright, but I actually hadn't thought about the nature of, excuse me, say you have like a fire service, or you have, ambulance service, or law enforcement. If you have those geographically tied services where it's like, say this is the firehouse and I keep building away from the firehouse. Yep. It may not even be that I'm building that many houses, but I'm just building them farther and farther away. So that response time from the firehouse increases, which necessitates an increased investment in trying to cover those people. Where it's like, okay, you built 1,000 houses. If you had just built them towards the firehouse, you would still have response time. And of course, population does factor into that eventually, but it's like, but we can still get to you within a minute, theoretically. And until we have calls consistently that overlap, and then we have rationing of services, if you build in the right direction, you can take more advantage of the existing infrastructure investment.
Yeah, exactly. I think
God, that's
you summarized the directional. Yeah, no, it's so when you talk about like growth principles, those are some of the things you look at. And where is there already infrastructure? Where do you have to run more infrastructure? And what's the cost of providing those added services? It could be something as the gravity flow in your wastewater. What's going to require lift stations and not to. And in our case, Nampa, we have Nampa School District, which actually does have they have capacity that they can absorb in their school system. And then you have Valley View School District, which is growing, and they think it'll be never-ending bonds if we continue to grow. So both Caldwell and Nampa, a lot of their growth area is in the Valley View School District. So something like that, whether you approve a subdivision in the Valley View School District, well, they have to live with our land use decisions. They don't get to make the land use decision. So, but even distinctions like that, where the school districts, the fire districts, the capacity of all the people providing services, their capacity to serve. So I think directionally, those are things, as well as transportation. So that's another thing that I want to incorporate in the fiscal impact analysis is that, we have a great team of in the traffic public works team looking at traffic master planning. But I think when we look at big areas in aggregate, there should be more comprehensive analysis on traffic impact. So there's one thing, for example, in Nampa that's called the Southwest Area Plan, which contemplates the possibility of 10,000 rooftops in a commercial node, almost a city within a city, 25, 30,000 people. And it's in an area right now where a lot of it would be putting pressure on Midway, and Midway is actually mostly in Highway District 4. And again, it's these patterns of annexation patterns. If we go up and touch Midway in certain points, but not the whole, then you get this weird jagged edge, and you're trying to control what the right-of-way dedication is and have a continuous, but we don't have the jurisdictional authority over it, because we might if there's annexations that occur. And right now, it's not even improvements on Midway are not in the Nampa's 10-year capital improvement plan. So no impact fees are being collected for this, but yet, we're contemplating an area plan, sort of a Southwest area plan. So I think what needs to be added to that sort of planning is fiscal impact analysis, as well as what is the traffic impact analysis. And I think what most residents are saying, if you're going to grow, a lot of people are like, don't grow. But if you grow, they get kind of your sentiment. There's some sense of an inevitability. We're responsible for making sure that growth occurs in a way that doesn't take us backwards in quality of life, where life is miserable. You create a traffic congestion nightmare in the middle. You're overloading mostly a rural road. And everyone asks the question, well, why didn't you plan for this ahead of time? And it's like, well, property rights, the growth happened. We throw our hands in the air and act like there's nothing we could do. There are things we can do, tools that we can exercise to make sure that we're planning and preparing responsibly to guide the growth. So I think that's a responsible thing for us. Yeah.
And again, I think that's really, really well said, which is that, look, at the end of the day, we do have property rights, and the fact that people have property rights and they can develop, it could be construed as a reason to just, as you said, throw your hands in the air. But I think it's really a really good point. It's like, yeah, look, we're not going to stop people, but like if we can guide it or set up our infrastructure so as growth happens, as it naturally will, then it's something that doesn't make everybody's life hell.
Correct. Yeah. That's a quality of life component. So yeah,
it's great. Rick, look, we've talked about a lot, man.
Yes,
we've talked about a lot. Is there anything we're missing?
I think the third tier, expanding recreational access. Briefly, I think we have great potential to improve the amenities within our existing parks. There's a great park we have Midway that still has a future phase to add 2 more ball fields. Clearly, when you have a growing community, there's more kids playing sports. As a kid who played sports, and who believes in the importance of sports from quality of life as well as mentoring and just it's just I mean, sports, to me it was a blessing. I had great coaches that poured into me and helped me be the person I am today. I mean, a lot of those lessons were learned on the ball field or on the basketball court. And so, we have an expanding community, and there's increased pressure on ball fields and being able to accommodate this growing community. So, pathways are also important. The number one exercise activity, and most of the surveys when I was at Nampa is walking. Walking is walking the dog, just going for a walk. I mean, a lot of people just like to do a 10, 15-minute walk. Even when I drove in here this morning, saw people walking very early in the morning. Right. So, having safe pathways, I would love to see Nampa connect possibly through the whole Treasure Valley. So with Boise, Meridian, us, and Caldwell, there is potential to provide connectivity if we're intentional about it and guide decision making in that way. I'd love to have an integrated trail system, pathway system. So those are all things that are really big to me. One of the things that I think Mayor Kling mentioned that potentially would have happened if the conveyance does go through the CWI is CWI does allow the city to use basically 10 soccer fields. And I was there this past Saturday. So the Premier League, which is like the equivalent of Little League or Pop Warner, there's hundreds and hundreds, I'm not exaggerating, hundreds, I mean, I think close to 1,000 kids that are playing youth soccer, and there's 10 fields and they're all full, and you need a big parking lot. You need capacity to allow parents, grandparents, and all these kids on the soccer field. But, that's CWI working with the city, and the city is procuring that really on behalf of the youth league to allow the opportunity. That's not like city youth league soccer. That's actually its own soccer league that the city has been sort of in this partnership with. So I know there's some anxiety there. Like, what happens if this conveyance doesn't happen? CWI doesn't want to renew. Usually I think the city renews in a 2-3 year time frame. I don't know what the next expiration time frame is on those 10 soccer fields, but I know Nampa does have some impact fee money for parks and is looking at, the need for a soccer park. So I'm a big advocate of the need. We just can't assume that we're going to be able to use CWI in perpetuity. So we need 10 soccer fields and then some. And do you concentrate that mostly in a soccer park with some peripheral soccer access to where people live? And so, I'm committed to making sure that we're using the impact fee money wisely coming in for parks and rec projects. In our developer community and whatnot, they're concerned too when impact fees go up because the margins on house pricing and stuff. But, I've talked to a lot in the development community, and they want to see quality of life. They know that no one's going to be buying their homes if our community is an undesirable place to be. So when I've talked to them, we need to have accountability so that they know every dollar is being spent. There's a good ROI in enhancing and protecting quality of life. If our quality of life stays desirable, then home values stay high, and people, are willing to invest in our community, not just homes, but also businesses. So obviously to attract business growth, one of the things, and you've had, I think, industry people on, they kind of look at the big picture. It's not just the affordability of the housing, but it's what does the entire what does recreational access look like? What do the schools look like? What does access to healthcare look like? There's a whole set of questions that are asked by someone who's looking to relocate into an area or invest in an area. So we need to keep Nampa's quality of life high, so we're attracting the type of investment we need that enhances our quality of life.
Love that, man. Listen, we've hit a lot of things.
Yes, we
Rick.
have.
I really appreciate you. I appreciate that you're running, right? And I'm not a voter in Canyon County. I'm not a voter in Nampa, but again, coming back full circle, like we as Americans need people that are willing to stand up and bring the value that they think needs to be brought to the community, whether or not people agree with us, right?
Yeah.
Whether or not you win, that's kind of irrelevant to me. It's relevant that people participate and we have the best ideas. Because if it's like one person running, it's like, and everybody always complains like some of my first interviews were like, well, this guy only has been on the school board because nobody ran against him for 20 years. I'm like, well, poo-poo on the community. Like, that's not this guy's fault. Like, he was the one standing up willing to run to be on the school board. So thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for putting your hand in the fire again, and man, good luck.
Thank you, Matt. Appreciate you. Blessings on you and your family. And thank you for the work you do. And look forward to being on here again in the future in some capacity.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, thanks,
Rick.
Matt.
Thank you.
Yep.